Hell's Paradise is a series that recently gained a lot of traction amongst battle shonen fans, in no short part because of its anime adaptation, which has put this amazing story in front of tons of new people. But recently, I have been seeing complaints about MAPPA's adaptation of this story, and I wanted to go over both the manga and the material that the anime has covered in order to determine which is holistically the better product. So just like I did with my Blue Lock anime versus manga video, I will be comparing both iterations of Hell's Paradise based on presentation, pacing, and emotional resonance, all in order to determine which version of the series is best for you. Now, before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to talk to you about today's sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is an awesome multiplayer military action game that is available on Xbox, PC, PlayStation, and Mac. This game was already great, but recently a major update, La Royale, was released for War Thunder, giving the game a whole French fleet led by the battleship Paris, the legendary BTR-80 and Su-39, as well as many other novelties appearing in the game. The visual effects were significantly refined in this update, making fights even more realistic. Planes, ground vehicles, and even naval vessels all show signs of destruction as they are being attacked by enemy forces. This same improvement in visuals allows us to have a realistic map depicting the entire globe, which War Thunder allows you to access and play in. This game includes vehicles from the USSR, USA, Germany, Great Britain, Japan, China, France, Italy, Sweden, and Israel. Each unit feels unique to play, and because the game allows for multiple types of vehicles to be used simultaneously, the variety of gameplay you can experience in War Thunder is endless. On top of all this, you can customize and improve your vehicle to have buffed up stats, armor, special equipment, as well as various decals, skins, and other decorative elements. Since there is always something new in War Thunder to do, players that stopped playing in the past may find themselves interested in discovering new features. Download War Thunder for free from the link in the description. All new players and those who haven't entered War Thunder for 6 months or more will receive 100,000 Silver Lions, a week of renting legendary German ground vehicles, 3 premium vehicles as a gift forever, XP boosters, a week of premium account, and other bonuses. Hurry up and get all of these from the link in the description. The season of German gifts will soon come to an end. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and now we can get back to the comparison. When it comes to presentation with Hell's Paradise, I've made it clear every time I've talked about the series that I think the art is absolutely phenomenal in the manga. It was so good to me, in fact, that I even made an entire video dedicated to breaking down and analyzing what makes the art so good last week, but for all of those who didn't watch that, here's the summarized version of my thoughts. Jigokuraku as an artist absolutely excels when it comes to his ability to design characters, his messy style that contributes to the tone of the manga, his elite shading ability, as well as his preference for making very detailed and uncanny settings for his characters to exist in. The only real problem I would say that I have with the Hell's Paradise manga artistically is that the choreography and creativity of movement within the fights doesn't truly move me in the way that I think it should, which is part of the reason I was so excited for the Hell's Paradise adaptation to drop in the first place. In my mind, MAPPA as a studio had already shown off a very clear ability to animate large-scale climactic battles in their new shonen IPs, with the obvious big examples being Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen. So while I wasn't necessarily expecting animation and visuals on the level of those two shows, I did come into this expecting to more or less be blown away when the big moments of the series hit, and I can't say that I was disappointed or even wholly wrong, but I do think that Hell's Paradise doesn't fully capitalize on every fight scene in the way that some recent MAPPA adaptations have. Before I talk about my gripes with the animation though, I do want to point out some of the things I did really like visually when it came to this anime. One of the first things being that the premiere episode did a really good job of making a first impression. Aside from maybe episode 9, there hasn't really been a better episode of the season based purely on the merits of how it looks, at least so far. The first episode was clearly handled with an extensive amount of care and focus relative to the rest of what we've seen so far, and you could tell this is not just in the fight between Sakiri and Gabimaru, but even the way that they just set a scene with dynamic lighting lets you know that the artist behind this project did really intend to make a splash with Hell's Paradise's debut. Even down to the quality of the fire animation, Hell's Paradise looks really good in this episode, and although I don't think it compares to really fluid, really high quality animation we get in something like Chainsaw Man, I personally would have been more than satisfied adaptation-wise if they maintained this level of quality with each episode. Now, I don't think that they did this, but I also don't necessarily think there is really any particular episode where I would say the entire thing is bad, but I would say that there is a pretty noticeable dip in quality that happens directly after the first episode, and that is what leads me to my biggest problems with the adaptation. The anime for the most part just looks kind of flat and generally uninteresting in a way that can't be said for the manga. The backgrounds and landscapes are okay, like they aren't particularly bad in any way that I can identify, but as someone who thinks that the backgrounds help set the mood in the manga so much, I can't help but be disappointed in a subpar adaptation of that. Even when ignoring the fact that characters moving in space doesn't feel too exciting here, the basic establishing shots when Gabimaru and Sagiri first land on the island fail to capture the uncanny beauty that is so prevalent in the manga, and it's a shame because I don't think it's something that you'd notice if you've never experienced the manga before, but the backgrounds drawn by Jigokuraku just add another layer of depth to the work that the anime just can't seem to. This by no means is the end of the world on its own, but as a manga fan who watches the adaptation, I can't say that this doesn't annoy me at all. More than that though, I think the elephant in the room when it comes to Hell's Paradise's animation is the fights. I've seen complaints about them here and there, and just like with the backgrounds, they are never bad so much as they are just kind of underwhelming. Gabimaru versus Lord Tenzin is an obvious exception in this because I think that the chaotic and violent nature of the manga was captured pretty well in that fight, but aside from that, the battles just haven't felt all that notable or exciting in the anime, and that, once again, is a shame. The anime had a real chance to truly elevate the source material in this aspect, and it kinda just didn't for the most part. It feels like with the staff and time allotted to this project, all they could do was reach the standard for what was barely acceptable, and then they simply moved on from it without intention to incorporate what made the manga so special stylistically, or use the medium of animation to accomplish certain things in motion and color that the manga never could. Gabimaru vs. Keiyun, Sagiri vs. Gabimaru, and Gentetsu vs. Gabimaru are all examples of fights that felt like they were just taken from the manga as quickly as possible with no desire to truly take what was in there to the next level. Now, not elevating the fights beyond the source material in and of itself is not some major criticism or crime of the anime, especially since I really like the source material, and in the fight department, I even admit myself that I don't think the manga handles it excellently either. But when you combine the fact that the fights are fine, and the fact that the anime doesn't have the same stylistic charm of the manga, it gets hard to say that the Hell's Paradise anime is a great visual adaptation of the original story. Like I've said multiple times, and like I will continue to reiterate, the animation gets the job done, and it is far and away from the worst animation I've ever seen. But if the Hell's Paradise manga were a 10 out of 10 in terms of visuals, the anime would be closer to a 6 or a 7. Passable, for sure, but not really what you'd like to see in a series that you love. Now, focusing less on the presentation of the anime from a visual standpoint and more on how it delivers the story and development of the narrative, I think the Hell's Paradise anime pulls significantly more even with the manga. I will just come out and say that I prefer the pacing of the manga 4, however, the caveat for that statement is that I tend to prefer manga pacing more than anime pacing anyway, so that take in particular isn't super indicative of a relatively neutral view. Even from my manga-skewed perspective though, I haven't really noticed any problems with the Hell's Paradise anime adapting story beats at a proper pace. The anime takes its time on moments that I feel require more explaining, and in moments of high action and hype, it speeds up and gets more exciting. It's not revolutionary pacing by any means, but the manga isn't revolutionary in the pacing department either, so I can't knock points for the anime just being good in this department. The manga has good pacing, so the anime has good pacing, and as far as I'm concerned, in this aspect, that's all the anime can really strive to do, short of rearranging certain events to make more sense or cut or add content. In the case of Hell's Paradise though, I don't think that's necessary, and neither did the anime staff apparently, so it doesn't really get done. Unlike the visual section, I don't really have an argument for the manga being clearly better at this aspect than the anime, nor do I think the reverse is true. So for this specific category, I'd like to give a point to both here. If you are someone that tends to like anime pacing more than manga, you'll like the anime more. And if you like manga pacing as a whole more than anime pacing, you'll like the manga more in this respect. It's as simple as that. I think here, your preferences for what you like in your series in regards to pacing will shine through. So the answer to which one is better for you is very dependent on the individual and their respective proclivities. Now, aside from the visuals and aside from the characters, one of the biggest appeals of Hell's Paradise is just how emotionally impactful it is. I think a lot of manga now, especially battle shonen, really focus on being hype and cool, and this applies to Hell's Paradise as well, don't get me wrong. but the series makes a real effort to attach you to the characters and the stakes emotionally, to the point where I think it becomes one of its stronger suits. Because of this, I think that one of the most important things that the anime adaptation had to do was replicate Yuji Kaku's ability to really reel you into the story and characters, and I think they pull it off just fine. Not great, not quite up to the standards of the manga, but fine. In terms of pacing and making sure to hit certain character beats at the right time, I've already made clear that I think the anime is satisfactory, so that really isn't the problem. That isn't the reason that I don't think the anime quite stacks up to the manga. The development is the same, the characters are the same, and the world is the same, but the problem just links back to the first aspect of the respective versions that I covered. If everything else is the exact same in terms of quality, but visually the manga accomplishes significantly more than the anime, it logically follows that the anime would fall short of the manga in this respect. I know some people would bring up the fact that the anime has voice acting and music to accompany it and the manga doesn't, and that's fair to do. That's fair to bring that up in this discussion, but I also don't think in this particular example that the voice acting and score is good enough to really push the needle in the anime's favor for me. And I want to clarify, I'm really not trying to dig at the voice actors or sound directors here. I think that they did a really good job with everything, and I truly don't have any complaints in that department. However, in order to clear the rather large gap between how well the manga is drawn and how well the anime is able to replicate, elevate, and adapt those drawings, you need stellar, top-tier voice acting and music to truly do a lot of the heavy lifting here. And aside from a few specific key exceptions, the anime just doesn't do that. When comparing to mediums like this, which heavily rely on their visuals to convey emotions, I just weigh what they're able to accomplish with their art quite seriously. And because the audio aspect isn't so great that it can trump the visual aspect, I have to say that the manga is better. So the fact that one has good voice acting with subpar art and the other has no voice acting with excellent art doesn't change my stance on the emotional resonance of it at all. I know some people can't truly get hooked on a story and its characters without first knowing what they sound like. I actually have some friends that are very annoyingly like that, so they won't read manga. And if you are one of those people, I'm sure that the anime is what would evoke greater emotions out of you. And if you are that person, this one definitely for you gets a contextual point. However, if that isn't who you are, the manga has my vote and is getting another point from me. The last section here before we go into my verdict exists for me to briefly talk about some things about both the anime and manga that I think are somewhat relevant to the conversation of which one you should pick, but aren't entirely worth making a category over. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is the opening. Trivial, I know, but I wanted to give a shout out to the Hell's Paradise opening for having really good music and really good visuals. I know that openings in general tend to have smoother and more ambitious animation than the actual series itself, mainly due to the fact that it's only 1 minute and 30 seconds worth of animation to be done, but if the entire anime could have replicated the opening more in style, I think we'd be having an entirely different conversation about the anime compared to the manga. Wishful thinking on my part, I know, but that's how I feel about it. That being said, it's pretty good, and I've been ragging on the anime for a while, so I wanted to end off my analysis of specifically what the anime does on a somewhat more positive point. But to get even more trivial, I wanted to say that one of the benefits to reading the manga is that if you read it and buy it physically, you get some really nice volume covers that you can display around your space. I know it's not a big deal to most people. Hell, it's not even a big deal to me in the grand scheme of things, but Jigokuraku is kind of an exception, as he's honestly one of my favorite artists when it comes to making volume covers. So if you are somebody a collector or just someone who likes to display their manga in a cool and creative fashion, Hell's Paradise as a series could possibly add to that. So if that's something that matters to you, you may need to consider getting the manga. Now, when it comes to my final thoughts on Hell's Paradise as an anime versus it as a manga, I gotta come out and say the manga just holds up better. The art is superior to the anime's adaptation of it, the pacing is just as solid as the anime's is, and because of how much better looking the manga is and how artistically Yuji Kaku was able to evoke emotions better, the emotional moments in the manga hit harder than they do in the anime. If I were to give a blanket statement on which one is better, with no context on the individual I am speaking to, I would 10 out of 10 times say that the manga is better. However, I have seen firsthand that the anime has been good enough to continuously pull people into the series that wouldn't have gotten into it otherwise, and because of that, the Hell's Paradise adaptation has my respect. What it also means is that the anime isn't totally horrendous, and is, in all honesty, a pretty good version of what I consider to be a great manga. This isn't like the late seasons of Seven Sins when talking about the animation, and it certainly doesn't butcher the story of characters like Tokyo Ghoul did. So in the grand scheme of things, in the totality of all the anime and all the manga adaptations that we could have gotten, Hell's Paradise is a solid, pretty good, like a solid 7 out of 10 adaptation to me. It is, in the simplest of terms, an adaptation that is just a bit worse than its manga counterpart. It happens all the time, and it's clearly enough for people who prefer anime, which at the end of the day is its target demographic. Y'all know my thoughts on which one is better. I've made this video talking about it in its entirety, but I'm curious what everyone who has seen both thinks about the anime versus the manga, so let me know down in the comments. If you liked what I had to say about Hell's Paradise, check out this art analysis video and this video where I broke down the core themes of the story. Subscribe for more Hell's Paradise and anime and manga content in general, and I'll see you in the next one.